Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. We're super excited that you're here. I wanted to make a brief introduction and then just pass the spotlight to Dominic. The format of today's present masterclass is going to be like a 40-minute talk on his part, and then we're going to be open for Q&As on the subject. For anyone that doesn't know Dominic, Dominic is an Ivy League graduate with a career in private and public sector that finally saw the light and turned into a coach and Tantra teacher. And he says he's a catalyst for your growth and evolution. He's an amazing friend and coach. And I'm sure we're going to have a super interesting conversation this evening. As you know, this month's topic in Seeker Circle is about polarity. So he joined in to talk about how polarity shows up in your personal life, in your relationships, and even in your work life and leadership. And we're going to be having a deep conversation on the topic with some real valuable advice on the topic. And then we can open up the conversation. Hopefully you'll learn how to move in the polarity and not struggle with the polarity, and how to really be able to live this through your lives. So, Dominic, it's all yours.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, Danielle. And thank you, everyone, for joining. I've heard a tip, regardless of who's shown up, I think it's my position to speak as if I'm speaking to thousands of people right now. So that's my frame. So thank you for showing. And I want to start out just saying framing to me is everything. It's like understanding like the context, because so much in life, I think, is just based on our perception. And so when we have a model of something, we understand it. So I grew up in Chicago. So I have a model that the Midwest, Chicago in particular, gets really, really cold going into the end of the year. So if someone, say, grew up in Florida, they wouldn't have that model. So they might show up in Chicago in the middle of the winter and not have a jacket, only because they didn't understand how to frame it correctly. And so when we talk about polarity, most of the conversation is going to be about framing. So imagine if you didn't know what a cat or a dog was, and then someone gifted you, say, a cat, but you weren't aware that that was a cat. And so you said, okay, people get pets. Let me look at pets people get. And you look and say, okay, well, like people get like dogs. So I'm going to treat this animal like a dog. It's the wrong framing, essentially. And so polarity is just a way of framing something that you're actually already doing, perhaps with some success, some non-success. What I want to do on this conversation is, by the end of it, there's some like takeaways I want you to have. So I made some notes here. With understanding polarity, I want you to walk away from this session, or even like during the session, I want you to have like more ease in your body, more ease in your life. I want you to feel like you have more alignment. I want you to walk away with better emotional health, better physical health. I want you to walk away with the capability to immediately have better relationships. And I also want you to feel during or perhaps afterward more peace and more joy. So these may seem like tall orders. So you can tell me how I did by the end or during as we go through this. But yes, this is what I want you to walk away from this conversation with, the proper framing. And ultimately, when you think about polarity, I want you to think of flow. It's kind of like the optimal position in life is flow. And so sometimes we hear like, optimal position, say like balance, but I think even an upgrade from that is flow. And so you can move back and forth between things as you need to. So in a nutshell, polarity itself is one energy that shows up in complementary forms. So like, one of the easy ones I think we can go for is if you think about, let's say the North and South Pole. That is one energy, just in different forms. So we have like a North Pole, we have a South Pole to it. Another thing we can think about, let's say like a magnet. Again, we have like a positive and a negative to it. So it's largely the same energy with some dramatically different characteristics. And one of the things that goes along with polarity is that you actually want to develop both. So it's not about one in dominance of the other. It's not about one in subservience to the other. You want to develop both of those. And so polarity is something that you can consider is an aspect of all through life. So everywhere you look, there's polarity. And so, like I said, North and South Pole, magnets, um, you can think about things such as like uh, light and dark, up and down. Things seem to have different qualities, but when you take them together, they seem to describe like an entire thing. And particularly for polarity as it applies to your life in order to get all these benefits I talked about, I think what you can look at is polarity, um, something within you that you have. It's sometimes it's described as, say, masculine and feminine energies. Uh, and sometimes it's described, say, as yang and yin. Sometimes that symbol is shown as, looks like two fishes or fish uh, intertwined with each other, a black one and a white one, but there's some white in the black and some black in the white, and it's showing like a balance. And so think of that balance, think of that flow. And so when it comes to yourself, when you think about um, optimizing yourself or becoming your best self, because I wanted you to think about starting from like the smallest building block, which in this case I'll say is like yourself, and then expanding out from that. And so out from that might be a relationship that you have, say, with a significant other. So, but step one, it's like the focus on yourself. And so um, the key to like an optimal existence is balancing or creating flow between these two energies. So let's say practical example, you're a guy, you have some job, let's say you have some managerial responsibilities over people. What you need to do that job really well is masculine and feminine energies. So I think a lot of times people may typically think, well, I need to be, always leading. I need to be somewhat, aggressive. I need to be dynamic. I have to like, tell people what to do. I need to be in charge, all those type of things, bring order, structure. And I'd say there's an argument to be made for all those. And at the same time, if those qualities are only used, that person will be like a horrific manager. And that would be the same if that were a man or if that were a woman using those energies, let's say in a managing role. So, because in a managing role, in addition to everything I said, you're also going to have things such as um, the ability to collaborate. You're going to have the ability to be supportive. You're going to have to be the ability to kind of sit back and listen. You're going to have the ability of mediating, negotiating with people, um, helping other people realize their strengths and bring that out of them, out of themselves. So from an energy side of things or from a yin side of things, we can say, well, those are feminine energies. Or we can say those are yin energies. And I would say, yes, but you're going to use both. And so whether the person managing is a man, you want to use both. Person managing is a woman, she will want to use both. Now, what it comes down to though, is that in mastering these polarities, these energies, you have to realize the way you are physically built and the way your consciousness is formed, you're going to have a certain inclination to some energies over others. And at the same time, it's going to feel better in your body. So some of these may sound stereotypical. I don't necessarily mean that, because we can find exceptions. But if you think more in terms of energies rather than say like genders, I think that will help out. And so I also want to encourage you, if you have questions like along the way, I mean, there will be dedicated Q&A at the end, but your questions along the way or clarification, you can, if you want, raise your hand. I'll show you. Raise your hand like that. And then, we can go in conversation. And if you can't find it on Zoom, then you can do this, and then we can also talk. So I was going back to say, sometimes like people think, well, stereotypically, here we go, a dude's masculine, woman's feminine, and it's like, no, we're actually going beyond that. However, I will say, there's certain things that feel really good to a male consciousness and a male body, that when he uses certain energies, it expands them and helps him grow. He gets invigorated. Sometimes you can say like his testosterone increases. So in some ways, doing like really, really difficult things in that male body, male consciousness, it's actually creates a lot of expansion. At the end of the day, that person might even feel more invigorated. Now, let's say you go to a woman, and let's say she's using a lot of these masculine energies, but if she's a female consciousness, feminine consciousness, and a female body, at the end of the day, she's likely going to feel drained. So it's not to say that she's not going to perform well, but she likely will feel drained at the end of the day, because the energies like in that system, in that construct, when I say that system, really it's like the physical body. It's not as say energizing. Whereas, let's say you take a male, if he spends all his day working on having people collaborate and come together and does a lot of nurturing and does a lot of development of people, he may be really good at that. But at the end of the day, he might be very drained. He might say, uh, if this is what the rest of my life is like, or this is what my job is like, I have to find like another one. This drains me. It just doesn't really feel good. And so I think if each of you check in, you can start to get an idea of, as you go about your work days, or as you go about interacting, say, with your partner, what type of activities, what type of behaviors really energize you, and which ones like leave you drained. Sometimes the masculine energies, getting to the right answer or getting to the perfect answer, are diving really deep into the weeds, are finding a solution, problem solving. You can say, like, that's masculine energy. Bodies that enjoy that energy, they're all about it. And then bodies that don't enjoy that energy can be somewhat repulsed by it. They can say, it's not about coming to a solution. It's about me being able to speak and me being heard. And so I wanted to also refer you to some of the promises I wanted you guys to have in terms of like, better health, more ease in your body. And so these are things like to check in with, because anytime you can sit, and I encourage, each of you during this conversation, or like after, during the day, say every 10 or 15 minutes, you just kind of check in and it's like, how do I feel? What am I feeling? Is my energy more going up, or is my energy more going down? And then once you determine that, you can also give an increase such as why. So you should always be asking yourself questions. You should check in, see how you're feeling, but you also like want to check in and ask yourself why, because the answers that we're seeking and the quality of our life really come from the questions that we ask ourselves, because the questions create this self-awareness. So by asking yourself why and thinking about masculine and feminine energy in your body, you might start to understand more. So I really enjoy this type of interaction. I said, oh, this interaction really puts me off. I want less of it, or I think someone else would be better at it. And so, finishing up, say, with like the individual, the more you master, I would say, we could say flow, but or balance, but more the flow between those two energies, and where you can switch very quickly, the better your life is going to become. Because let's say, we use the example of a guy. Sometimes, he'll be speaking to his partner, and he'll notice himself, yeah, I'm doing that real masculine thing. I'm just problem solving. I'm just waiting to hear what the problem is. I'm waiting to to solve it. But then he might say, well, wait a second. I recall sometimes that this is not appreciated. And so I've heard sometimes I should just ask, um, how are you feeling? Or I should be just be more curious about what's going on. And so at that point, you might say, well, let me go more into my feminine. And let me, instead of problem solving, let me just be, do active listening and say, oh, tell me more. Or how did you feel when that happened? Or that sounds like that would be really disappointing. Was it? Or like, what are you going to do next, type thing. And so you're not trying to solve, you're trying to be. Um, so that's, if you're able to flow between these energies, these poles, as an individual, then we get into the next thing, what I say about the relationship. And so that gets a little bit more complex. So everyone can be a Buddha, an enlightened being, like when they're by themselves. So, if you want to spend your existence, say, sitting in a cave meditating, or you somehow find yourself, you're the last person on earth, and you get to walk around and talk to deer and horse and cats and dogs, you'll probably have a very, very peaceful life. But if you're going to interact with people, and you're going to, say, have relationships, you're not going to have as much, say, opportunity for that immediate peace, because now you have to bring, like, not only your presence, but you're going to be more, word that comes to mind is like tested, but it's not necessarily tested. I think you're going to be called forth to really develop your capabilities to go between these different energies. Because not only are you ideally developing those capabilities, the person you're interacting with, they have a mix of those energies in them, and they have different ability to go back and forth. And some people, you'll find, they're just stuck. They're stuck in feminine energy. Or they're just stuck in masculine energy. Or they can switch, but it takes like a really long time. They're not dynamic. They're, say, somewhat rigid in that. And so, even if you become, say, really good at that yourself, going back and forth, depending on who you talk to, you may find yourself more challenged, because you're not only trying to hit the right flow of these energies between yourself, you're trying to hit the right flow of energies between you and the other person. And sometimes it's between you and an entire group. Imagine if you're giving a presentation, say, to 20 people or like 100 people. In order to connect, you'll use different things. In fact, you'll want to display that energy. Sometimes you'll be more in storytelling mode, and other times you'll be more in problem solving, or more providing like a solution. So if we go back to like the relationship, let's say, we'll use a stereotypical man and woman. Um, I would say that the biggest tip to having like the best relationship is for each party individually to optimize their usage of these two energies. And so for a man, it's really, I would say, becoming like the best version of the masculine energy, or wielding those energies, are, we can say again, like yang energies, as well as the ability to go into yin energies at times. And I would say for a woman, it's similar and opposite. She wants to develop like the best version and the best ability to handle the yin energies, the feminine energies, and she wants to develop enough of a grasp of the masculine energies. So, to give you some practical examples, like what we hear, because I work with couples a lot, and one of the things I always hear from my female clients is that, well, he seems emotionally stunted, or he's not able to really see me, or he's not really able to connect with me. And, he's great at his job, he's great at being a provider, bringing money home. But like when we're together, I don't really feel like his presence, he feels like he's distracted or his attention is someplace else. And presence in terms of masculine energy it's one of like the core groundstones of masculine energy, of yang energy, just grounded presence. Just think of like a mountain, say in the storm, regardless of what's going on, it's just immovable, constant, unchanging, unfazed by what's going around, on around that. But at the same time, the masculine is also called to come out of that from time to time and connect. So it's still being present, but then it's also to, um, we might say, show more of those heart qualities, more of the feeling qualities, and connect on that level. So um, that's one of the things out here frequently about the male. And so what I can say to my male clients is that masculine part is really important, but you also have what we call like an inner feminine or like inner yin energy. And so that needs to be there as well. And so it just can't sit there undeveloped or unused. You have to dive into it, because that's going to allow you to connect in a way that your partner wants you to connect. And we jump over to the woman on um, she also has, say, what we call like an inner masculine. And so um, sometimes, my male clients will say it's hard to connect with her because, she's always complaining. She's always the victim. I can never do anything right. She's so sensitive, these type of things. And so, I want to add, like, anything used to excess becomes like a weakness. And so I do think for a woman, sensitivity is a superpower. That ability to really be in the heart, that ability to really, have empathy and compassion, like on tap, is wonderful, but up to a point. Because if there's too much compassion, too much empathy, then what the person can find for themselves is that they find themselves to be a doormat. They find that they're a people pleaser. They find that they're always taking care of other people's needs and not their own. And so that whole thing about balance/flow is like super important. And so with a woman with a healthily developed inner masculine, she has something that we call like boundaries. She has standards. And so still willing to nurture, still willing to guide, still willing to support, but she also knows, well, I cannot give what I don't have. So if I'm empty, or if I've been depleted from all the nurturing I've done, then I'm of no good to anyone, and I'm not of any good to myself. So on the couple side, and because many of us from time to time over the course of our lives will probably find ourselves in a relationship, or we'll have like multiple relationships. This is really something to master, because a lot of people can find peace just being by themselves. But people tend to not want to be by themselves. And so if they're going to do something which is more complex and also can be more rewarding, they want to develop that ability to flow between the masculine and feminine, and also be in support of attracting a partner that is like working on and doing the same. So that's the concept I want to say, basically from going from the individual, going towards, say, the couple, using this framing of polarity. And so, my desire is that, you've gotten some good examples here. Like you can see that, you can see how these energies are going on in like your own life. And then I'll conclude before I get to like the bigger Q&A. It's what are some other uses, say, of just polarity in life? And so um, it can be for one's own evolution. And so you can think of like, growth, you can think spiritual evolution, or you can say just developing one's own consciousness. And to maybe use a more concrete term, there's something called IQ. Just like raw intelligence. And then there's emotional intelligence, EQ. And so whether you want to call it SQ for spiritual quotient or CQ for consciousness quotient, think of those as proxies, not exactly the same thing, but proxies for just becoming more emotionally intelligent. And by that, I mean, you're becoming more self-aware, and you're getting to know yourself better. You're getting to know your own challenges and like your own shortcomings better. And then at the same time, the more that you increase your own self-awareness, just naturally, you're going to identify with the struggles of other people. So it's, if you have had, let's say, an experience of your relationship that didn't work out or a job that didn't work out, and you were able to see that the complication in that, or the major shortcoming, that was you and how you were showing up, and you're able to take that not from a place of judgment or blame, but a place of like saying, okay, what can I do differently, or what is possible, or what do I get to work on? A lot of times that comes down to this increase in emotional intelligence. And I think through the framing, what you'll see is if you're working on increasing the depth and the utilization of these masculine and feminine energies in you, and your flow between the two, you will find yourself invariably increasing in your own consciousness, increasing in your own evolution. And so what's the result of that is you become freer in life. Life becomes less sticky. And so by that, I mean, let's say dynamics or conversations that used to catch you, they just pass through you, because you're no longer a match to get hooked by those conversations. And at the same time, you can look at those conversations from more of an objective perspective, because you're coming at it from a higher place of consciousness. So a lot of times, you'll see this dynamic going on when, say, people talk about politics or religion or even sports teams. You can see how people get caught up in it. And as you work on these energies within yourself, you'll have more of what I say, a detachment from that, but also much more of a deeper presence where you can appreciate both sides or all sides without necessarily saying, well, one side or other is true. It's just that I'm observing many truths, just as I was able to observe many truths within myself as I became more and more familiar with these like masculine and feminine energies. And I think the last thing I would say, uh, it's uh, going back to relationships in terms of like using these energies. You can use your own relationship as a place for transformation. So again, if you were just going to roam the earth by yourself, could be very peaceful, but you're not going to have a lot of opportunity, say, for evolution, because there isn't that friction per se. And, the framing I give for existence, I say, okay, so what's the point? Why are we here? To me, it's a very simple thing. We're here for evolution. We're here for growth. And so from one lens, you could look at that. Every time you encounter difficulty, you can kind of say, have a mini celebration, because you say, yes, this is what I'm here for. I'm here to experience my limitations so I can use these limitations as fuel, as data, as information to help me grow beyond. Because once I learn the lesson that is here, once I go beyond this limitation, I'll no longer will experience this challenge. And I think one way you can look at this, it's very similar to just getting in better physical shape. The first day in the gym, you might feel very challenged and weak. You keep going to the gym, maybe in like 2 months or 3 months, it'll still be challenging, but the same things that were challenging in day one are not as challenging, or now they're no longer a challenge. So this is also the opportunity you have to use your relationship as an alchemizing, a transformative, a cauldron to become your better self. And so just as you might go to school with the sole purpose of learning and gaining knowledge, you can use your relationship in the same way with the sole purpose of becoming that better person. And so you're becoming the better person, not specifically for your partner. You're using the elements in the relationship, the triggers, the challenges, the things that you feel are insurmountable, and you're using those as saying, okay, I see what my work is, I see what my lessons are, and then using that information to go back into the classroom within yourself to work on things, like letting go of things. Perhaps there's things, say, in childhood with mom or dad or siblings that you're still carrying, learning how to let those go, learning how to love, not from, say, a transactional perspective, or not from a place of insecurity or grasping, but from a love of getting more to that unconditional, loving from focusing more on what you can give rather than what you can receive. And even just very practical, it's like really learning not only love from a metaphysical, emotional side, but physical love. You go from maybe being a very poor lover to becoming a phenomenal lover. And you're only going to know that by getting feedback from your partner. And based on what your partner says, again, using that and say like, oh, this is what I get to work on. This is some places where I'm not as knowledgeable as I thought I was, or I could increase my knowledge. So that's in a nutshell what I wanted to say about polarity.
It's like skim the absolute surface, but it was super interesting. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and everything that you shared with us. And hopefully everyone will continue to want to study this. You made a really interesting book recommendation for the newsletter. So it's exactly on that. I don't remember the name exactly, but it's on our newsletter. So everyone can check it out. And thank you. Thank you so much, Dominic. You're amazing.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for showing up tonight. It's such a worthwhile topic. I'm glad you wanted to engage with it today.